Some families do not lose control because you betray them. They lose control because you finally stop letting them call fear love. This is that kind of story. My name is Claire Ellison. I'm 36 years old, and I live in Charleston, South Carolina. I work as a child protection intake coordinator, which means I spend my days listening to children explain things adults tried to hide. I thought that job had taught me how to recognize danger. Then my own son came home carrying it in a locked wooden box. It happened on a Saturday morning, 11 days before we were supposed to move to Portland, Maine. At 11:46, I heard 3 knocks on the front door. Not strong adult knocks, not calm neighbor knocks, small knocks, fast knocks, scared knocks. When I opened the door, my 9-year-old son Mason stood on the porch with his face wet, his shirt collar stretched sideways, one shoelace dragging loose, and both arms wrapped around an old dark wooden box with a brass latch. My mother's silver SUV was already turning at the end of the street. She had not waited to see if I opened the door. She had not walked him inside. She had not called. She had left my child on my porch, shaking so badly the box rattled against his chest. I pulled him inside and locked the door. The click of the lock made him flinch. That was the first thing that told me this was not just another family argument. Mason had never been afraid of our front door before. I knelt in front of him and asked if anyone had hurt him. He shook his head. I asked if anyone hit him. He shook his head again. I asked if anyone touched him in a way that scared him. He whispered, "No." Then he looked down at the box. His mouth trembled. "Grandma said if you open it wrong, you'll make everything worse." For a few seconds I forgot how to breathe. The box had a white envelope taped across the top. My name was written on it in my mother's perfect handwriting. Claire. Nothing else. My first instinct was to rip it open. My second was to call my mother and scream until the whole street heard me. But Mason was watching my face, and in that moment, I remembered something every frightened child teaches you. When a child comes home scared, your reaction becomes part of their safety. So I swallowed every scream in my throat. I set the box on the kitchen counter. I took pictures from every angle. The front, the latch, the envelope, the tape, the scratch on the side, the places where Mason's fingers had pressed into the dust. Then I sat my son on the couch, wrapped him in a blanket, gave him his headphones, and told him his only job was to breathe. He looked at me and asked, "Are they going to take me away?" That question changed something inside me. Not slowly. Not after therapy. Not after a long night of thinking. Right there. Because until that moment, some damaged little part of me was still trying to keep the word family attached to people who had spent years making that word feel like a trap. But when my child asked if his grandmother and step-grandfather could take him away because he told the truth, I stopped being their daughter first. I became his mother. I called my husband Eli. Then I called my best friend Tessa. Then, before I touched the latch, I called the police. To understand why, you need to understand the house I came from. From the sidewalk, my childhood looked beautiful. White porch columns, polished floors, framed family photos, Sunday brunches, charity dinners, and a mother everyone in Charleston seemed to admire. My mother, Evelyn Crane, owned a small interior staging business. She made empty houses look warm enough to sell. She knew where to place flowers, how to fold linen napkins, which lamps made people feel wealthy, and how to make strangers say, "What a lovely home." People called her graceful. They called her generous. They called her devoted. Inside our house, devotion meant obedience. If I made her proud, she introduced me as her brilliant daughter. If I disagreed, she said I was humiliating her. If I cried, she lowered her voice and told me nobody liked a girl who made herself hard to love. My stepfather, Grant Crane, entered my life when I was 12. He was a private security consultant with perfect posture, expensive watches, and the calmest cruelty I had ever heard. Grant never needed to shout. He could destroy your confidence with one question. "Are you sure that's what happened? Do you really think people will believe you? Is this worth embarrassing your mother?" He made doubt feel like a family value. By the time I left for college, I had learned how to apologize before I even knew what I had done wrong. Maybe that is why I chose the work I did. Every day, I listened to children explain fear that left no bruise. I heard adults call control concern. I heard relatives call threats family matters. I heard the same polite words over and over. Misunderstanding, discipline, Private issue, overreaction. So when my own child came home trembling with a locked box and a warning, I did not need blood to know something was wrong. My husband Eli was the first person who taught me that love could be quiet without being dangerous. He worked as a marine electrician at a shipyard outside Charleston. He fixed wiring systems on old boats, research vessels, and coastal equipment. He came home smelling like salt, metal, and honest work. He did not perform kindness, he just lived it. That alone made my mother suspicious. Evelyn did not understand a man who did not try to control the room. Grant disliked him even more because Eli could look him in the eye without trying to impress him. After Mason was born, my mother turned grandmotherhood into a public role. There were embroidered blankets, professional photos, silver baby gifts, and long social media posts about legacy. But behind closed doors, she criticized everything. His bedtime, his food, his clothes, the way Eli let him ask questions, the way I let him say no. The way Mason preferred building cardboard boats with his father over sitting still in Evelyn's living room while she corrected his manners. Grant liked to say boys needed discipline. What he meant was that boys needed to learn which adults they were supposed to fear. By the time Mason turned 7, I had rules. No unsupervised visits, no school pickups, no private conversations about me or Eli, no gifts with conditions, no telling Mason that loving us meant disappointing them, no calling him our boy. Evelyn acted wounded every time I repeated a boundary. I'm your mother, Claire. I raised you. I shouldn't need permission to love my grandson. But she followed the rules in public because she loved looking patient more than she loved being honest. Then Eli got the job offer in Portland. It was a senior position with a coastal research maintenance company. Better pay, better hours, better schools. A clean start far enough away that Evelyn and Grant could not turn every birthday, recital, and dentist appointment into a loyalty test. We told them at a seafood restaurant near the harbor because I thought a public place would keep everyone civilized. That was my first mistake. Evelyn folded her napkin and smiled too carefully. Maine is very far. Grant looked at Eli and said, "What kind of man uproots a child for a job that might not last?" Eli answered calmly, "The kind who accepts a stable offer that helps his family." Grant turned to Mason, who was coloring a maze on the kids' menu. "Did they ask if you wanted to leave everyone who loves you?" Mason froze. I put my hand on the table. "Do not put that on him." Evelyn leaned toward my son. "Sweetheart, you know Charleston is your home, don't you?" Mason looked at me. Not because he did not know the answer, because he knew adults were setting a trap, and he was too young to know where the safe step was. I said, "His home is with us." Grant sat back slowly. "Children belong close to their roots." Eli said, "Children belong where they are safe." The table went silent. For the next week, Evelyn softened. That was always her pattern. When control slipped, she wrapped guilt in velvet. She sent old pictures of Mason at 3 with frosting on his nose, Mason asleep under a Christmas quilt at her house, Mason holding a shell at Sullivan's Island. Each photo came with one sentence: "I don't want him to remember me as someone he was taken from. I hope he knows I loved him before Maine. I pray you never understand what it feels like to be erased." She never said she was sorry. She only described herself as wounded until her wound became the center of the room. Grant called Eli once. Eli let it go to voicemail. Grant said he may have spoken too directly at dinner, but men sometimes reacted strongly when family was being fractured. Not when they frightened a child. Not when they crossed a line, when family was being fractured. People like Grant always had passive sentences ready, a way to make harm sound like weather. I ignored them for 3 days. Then Mason heard one of Evelyn's voice messages while I was washing dishes. Her voice trembled through the speaker before I could lower it. "I just want one sweet goodbye with my grandson before he is too far away to remember my voice." That night, Mason came into my room holding the cardboard lighthouse he and Eli had been building for weeks. It had a blue roof, little paper windows, and a sign across the front that said, "New coast, same light." He asked if he could give it to Grandma before we moved. Children can be so generous to people who make them feel responsible for adult sadness. I wanted to say no. Every protective part of me screamed no. But Mason's eyes were hopeful and guilty at the same time. He did not want lunch. He wanted permission not to feel cruel. So I called Tessa Ward, my best friend and a child trauma therapist. I told her everything. She did not tell me what to do. She only said, "If you allow it, write the rules like you are writing them for court." So I did. One goodbye lunch, 90 minutes, at Evelyn's house only. No surprise stops, no other relatives. No talking about custody, courts, relocation, abandonment, loyalty, or whether Mason wanted to stay in Charleston. No criticizing me or Eli. No asking Mason to keep secrets. His phone stayed in his pocket. If he asked to come home, he came home immediately. Evelyn replied, "Of course, darling. I would never make this harder for him." Grant replied 6 minutes later. Clear rules are good. We all want peace. Peace. People who weaponize fear love that word. Saturday morning, Evelyn arrived at exactly 10. She wore ivory linen, pearl earrings, and the expression she used when neighbors might be watching. Grant sat in the passenger seat and did not get out. I noticed that. Mason hugged me twice. He had the lighthouse wrapped in tissue paper on his lap. I checked that his phone was in his pocket. I reminded him of our safety word. If he texted Blueberry, I would call and come get him. He rolled his eyes a little, because he was 9 and wanted the world to be less serious than it was. Then he waved from the back seat as the car pulled away. I stood in the driveway long after they disappeared. Eli came beside me and said, "I hate this." I said, "Me too." He had to run to the shipyard for a final equipment handoff before the move, but he promised to keep his phone on loud. I went inside and tried to pack. I taped one kitchen box crooked, ripped the tape off, and taped it again. At 10:28, Evelyn sent a picture. Mason was sitting at her patio table with a plate of fruit and biscuits in front of him. He was smiling. Not his real smile, his polite one. I texted, "Please remind him he can call any time." She answered, "He is having a lovely time." At 10:41, I called Mason. No answer. At 10:44, I called again. Voicemail. At 10:46, I grabbed my keys. At 10:46 and a few seconds, the first knock hit the door. By 11:10, Tessa was in my living room. By 11:17, Eli was driving home from the shipyard. By 11:22, I had photographed the box from every angle. Mason sat under a blanket on the couch, staring at a nature documentary with the volume off. Tessa sat near him, breathing slowly so he could copy her. I asked if he could tell me what happened. He stared at the floor for a long time. Then he began. At first, lunch was fine. Grandma made chicken salad without celery because she knew he hated celery. Grant asked about school. Evelyn cried when Mason gave her the lighthouse. At first, Mason thought they were happy tears. Then Grant picked it up, turned it over, and said, "New coast, same light. Is that what your parents told you to write?" Mason said, "No. I wrote it." Grant said lighthouses warn people about danger. Then he said, "Maybe you should think about who is steering you toward rocks." Mason tried to change the subject. He showed them the route we planned to drive to Maine. He had drawn it on printer paper with little stars for the hotels. Grant took the map and asked why Portland had a big star but Charleston had only a small circle. Mason said because Portland was where we were moving. Grant tore the star off the page. Not the whole map, just the star. A small tear. A quiet one. The kind that tells a child an adult is still in control. Evelyn told Mason not to cry because crying would make me think they had done something wrong. Then Grant went into his office and came back carrying an old wooden memory box. I knew that box. It used to sit on the top shelf of our hallway closet when I was a child. Evelyn called it the family keepsake box. Inside were old letters, recital ribbons, holiday cards, dried corsages, and photos arranged to prove our family had always been beautiful. Mason said Grant placed the box in front of him. Evelyn opened the lid. Inside were photographs. Mason outside his school gate. Mason leaving the public library with me. Mason standing beside Eli's truck at a gas station. Mason outside the dentist. Mason walking into his piano teacher's studio. None of those pictures had been sent to Evelyn. None had been taken at family events. Some were from places she did not even know about. My son had been watched. Grant tapped one photo and said, "Families protect children by paying attention." Evelyn said, "Your mother thinks distance will make her powerful, but she forgot we know how to find what matters." Mason started crying then. He asked for his phone. Evelyn told him not to be dramatic. Grant said calling me would only create a scene. Then Mason asked for his lighthouse back. Evelyn looked at him and said, "Some things are not meant to survive being taken away." Grant closed the memory box and put it in Mason's hands. The envelope was already taped to the top. Mason said something rattled inside. He asked what it was. Grant said, "Evidence." In the car, Mason cried the whole way home. Evelyn did not comfort him. Right before she let him out at the curb, she turned around and said, "Tell your mother this is her chance to stop, before court decides for her." Then she leaned closer. "If she opens it like a reasonable woman, no one has to be embarrassed." Mason's voice broke when he repeated the last part. "But if she makes a scene, Grandma said people will ask why I'm scared of her." Tessa closed her eyes. I put both hands flat on my knees because if I did not hold my body still, I thought I might shake apart. I told Mason he did the right thing. He looked at me like he wanted to believe me. Am I bad because I didn't make them happy? That question hurt more than anything inside that box ever could. I held his face gently. "No, sweetheart. Adults are responsible for their own feelings. You are responsible for telling the truth when something feels wrong." He cried then. Not loudly. Just the tired crying of a child who had spent 90 minutes trying to survive adults who called fear love. Then the police arrived. Officer Lena Brooks came in first. Her partner, Officer Daniel Reyes, followed with a notepad and the careful expression of someone already listening. I had been afraid they would hear grandparents and relax. They did not. Officer Brooks asked if Mason was safe in another room. She asked whether Evelyn or Grant had permission to photograph him at school or activities. She asked if the box had been opened. I said no. She looked at the envelope and said, "If there is any device inside, we are not turning it on." My mouth went dry. A device. I had not said the word. She put on gloves, photographed the box, and cut the tape on the envelope. Inside was one page. "Claire, do not confuse your anxiety with motherhood." That was the first sentence. I forced myself to keep reading. "You have made impulsive choices for years, and now you are dragging Mason away from the only stable family he has. Grant and I have documented enough to prove that your home is not as peaceful as you pretend. If you force this move, we will make sure the right people see what Mason has been living with. Open the box and think carefully. This can stay private if you choose family over pride." Officer Reyes slid the letter into an evidence sleeve. Officer Brooks opened the latch. Inside was Mason's lighthouse, broken. The blue roof had been crushed inward. The sign that said, "New Coast, same light," had been torn away and replaced with a strip of paper that said, "A child needs roots." Under the lighthouse was Mason's school journal. It had gone missing from his backpack 3 weeks earlier. We thought he had left it at the library. He had cried because it had his drawings in it. Now it was inside my mother's memory box. Officer Brooks opened it carefully. The first pages were Mason's real handwriting, spelling words, a dinosaur drawing, a list of things he wanted to see in Maine. Then the handwriting changed. Adult handwriting trying to look childish. "I feel scared when Mom gets quiet. Dad gets angry about Grandma. I don't know if I want to move. Mom says I have to say I'm happy." Dates were written beside each sentence. Fake dates, fake feelings, fake evidence built out of my child's stolen notebook. Beneath the journal were the surveillance photos: school, library, dentist, piano, gas station, our front porch. At the bottom of the box was a black USB drive with a white label. "For custody review." And underneath the broken lighthouse, taped into the hollow cardboard base Eli had built with Mason, was a small square device with a blinking light. Nobody spoke for a few seconds. Officer Reyes leaned closer. "That appears to be a tracking or recording device." Eli walked through the front door just as those words left his mouth. He looked from the officers, to me, to the open box. Then he saw Mason's broken lighthouse. His face went still. He did not ask what happened first. He went straight to our son. He knelt in front of Mason, held the back of his head, and whispered, "I'm here. You're home. Nobody is taking you." Mason collapsed into him. Officer Brooks waited until Mason was with Tessa in the den before she asked Eli if he knew any reason Evelyn or Grant would mention court. Eli looked at me. Guilt crossed his face. "Grant came to my job yesterday." The room changed. Eli said Grant had been waiting near the employee lot at 6:55 Friday morning. He was leaning against his car like he belonged there. He told Eli that courts respected stability. Then he mentioned Eli's accident. 4 years earlier, Eli had been trapped in a maintenance hold during an electrical fire. He survived, but for months afterward he had panic attacks in tight spaces and around burning smells. He went to therapy. He healed. It was private. I had told my mother only once, during the worst of it, when I still believed a daughter could hand her mother pain without watching it become ammunition. Grant knew details he should not have known. The name of Eli's therapist. The month he returned to work. A sentence Eli had whispered to me at 2 in the morning. What if I'm not steady enough to be his father right now? That sentence had never been written anywhere. Eli said Grant tapped his own ear and said, "People reveal themselves when they forget who might be listening." I looked at the device in the box. My skin went cold. Grant had told Eli that if we insisted on moving, the right people might need to look at whether Mason was safe with a mother who worked around trauma all day, and a father with a history of anxiety. Then he said, "No one wants this to become ugly. But if Claire insists on running, ugliness may be necessary." Eli had planned to tell me after Mason came home. He did not want to scare me while Mason was still with them. He thought Grant was bluffing. Then he saw the box. Then he knew. I wanted to be angry at Eli for not telling me immediately. A part of me was. But mostly I understood the trap. Grant had counted on everyone staying quiet for different reasons. Eli to protect me from panic. Me to protect Mason from adult conflict. Mason to protect everyone from being angry. That was how control survived. It assigned everyone a silence and called it love. At 12:38, while the officers were still there, someone knocked on the front door. 3 hard knocks, adult knocks, confident knocks. I knew before I looked. Grant stood on our porch in a navy blazer. Evelyn was behind him, crying into a tissue. Not the way Mason had cried. The way a woman cries when she has chosen her lighting. Officer Reyes opened the door and stepped outside. Grant tried to look past him. "This is a family misunderstanding." Officer Reyes said there was an active report involving a child, possible surveillance, and a concealed device. Grant smiled. "I'm sure you're trying to help, officer, but we are Mason's grandparents." Officer Brooks came up beside Reyes. "Grandparents are not exempt from child safety concerns." Evelyn made a wounded sound. "Claire, please, tell them this has gone too far." I stood behind the officers. For the first time in my life, my mother looked small to me. Not harmless. Small. "There is a difference," I said. "You made my child carry fake journal entries, surveillance photos, and a hidden device." Evelyn covered her mouth. "Hidden device? Claire, no. It was for safety." Grant cut in. "It was not active in any harmful way." Officer Brooks looked at him. "How do you define harmful?" Grant's eyes sharpened. "I define harmful as dragging a child across the country with unstable parents." Evelyn pointed at me. "You have always made everything dramatic. Mason is sensitive because you taught him to fear us." Something old in me tried to fold. The daughter trained to smooth the room, to translate cruelty into concern, to say, "Mom, please," instead of "stop." But Mason was behind me. The box was on my table. My son's stolen journal was inside an evidence sleeve. So I said, "You are not coming inside. You are not speaking to Mason. You are not calling him. You are not sending gifts. You are not using relatives to reach him. This ends today." Grant laughed once. "You don't have the authority to erase us," Officer Brooks said. "She has the authority to protect her child. You have been told to leave." Evelyn looked at me with disbelief. "You would choose strangers over your own mother?" I looked at the officers, at Tessa, at Eli, at the evidence bag. Then I looked back at her. "No. I'm choosing my son over the people who made strangers necessary." Grant's face changed. The polite mask cracked. "You will regret making enemies of people who know your weaknesses." Officer Reyes stepped forward. "Sir, that sounded like a threat." Grant straightened. "I'm stating facts." Officer Reyes said, "Then here is another fact. You need to leave this property now." They left. But before Evelyn reached the sidewalk, she turned and called, "Mason will hate you for this one day." Mason heard it from the hallway. That night, after the house was finally quiet, he asked if it was true. "Will the first hate you?" I sat beside him on his bed, surrounded by half-packed boxes. "You are allowed to feel anything someday," I said. "Angry, sad, confused, all of it. But I will never ask you to pretend you are safe with someone who scares you just because they want to be called family." He thought about that. Then he whispered, "I don't want to say goodbye anymore." "You don't have to." The next 48 hours were paperwork, screenshots, phone calls, and the kind of exhaustion that makes your body feel borrowed. We changed the locks, even though Evelyn and Grant did not have keys. We changed the garage code. We removed them from every emergency contact list. We notified Mason's school, piano teacher, dentist, and after-school program. We saved every message where Evelyn had agreed to the lunch rules. We saved Grant's voicemail. We wrote down times. We wrote down phrases. We wrote down everything. Documentation is how truth survives people who rehearse denial. Tessa connected us with a family attorney named Naomi Price. Naomi had silver hair, rectangular glasses, and a calm voice that made chaos organize itself. She reviewed the police report, the letter, the photographs, the fake journal pages, Eli's statement, and the device report. Then she said, "This is not boundary crossing. This is intimidation involving a child." Hearing it in legal language did not make it hurt less. It made it real. Naomi filed for an emergency protective order. She advised us to delay the move by 1 week, not because we were surrendering, but because Grant wanted us to look unstable. "He wants panic," she said, "so we are going to be boring, precise, and impossible to dismiss." Boring, precise, impossible to dismiss. Those became my survival words. Evelyn called 17 times that Sunday. I did not answer. Grant left one voicemail. Naomi told us not to listen alone, so we played it in her office Monday morning. Grant's voice came through smooth and controlled. "Claire, you are making a serious mistake. Your mother is devastated. Mason is confused. You have allowed outsiders to turn a family concern into a legal performance. Think carefully before you create a record you cannot undo." Naomi paused it. "There," she said. "What?" "A record you cannot undo. He understands exactly what this is." She saved it. By Monday afternoon, Evelyn had started calling relatives. By Tuesday morning, my Aunt Beatrice called me. Beatrice was my mother's older sister, a retired school principal with a voice like a closing door. She did not begin with comfort. She began with, "Tell me what your mother is leaving out." So I told her enough. There was a long silence. Then she said, "Bring the documents to my house Thursday. I'm inviting the people she has already called." I almost said no. Family meetings were where Evelyn performed best. She would cry. Grant would speak calmly. I would look emotional, but Naomi surprised me. "One controlled meeting with witnesses may help," she said. "We do not argue. We present. We leave." Eli hated it. Tessa hated it more. But I knew something they did not. In my family, silence was where Evelyn stayed powerful. For once, I wanted her to face the room with the box open. Thursday evening we went to Beatrice's house. Not Mason. Never Mason. He stayed with Tessa, making pancakes for dinner because Tessa believed emotional emergencies deserved breakfast food at strange hours. I carried a plain blue binder, copies only, never originals. The living room was full. Aunt Beatrice, 2 cousins, my Uncle Ray, Evelyn's church friend Marjorie, who had clearly been told enough lies that Beatrice wanted her to hear the truth. And then Evelyn and Grant, seated together on the couch like defendants, who still believed they owned the courthouse. Evelyn looked pale and fragile. Grant looked bored. That frightened me more. Beatrice did not offer coffee. She said, "Claire, speak." Evelyn made a broken sound. "Bea, this is cruel." Beatrice looked at her. "Then the truth will be brief." I opened the binder. My hands shook. Eli placed his palm flat against my back. I started with the written lunch rules. Then the picture Evelyn sent at 10:28. Then my unanswered calls. Then the doorbell still showing Mason on my porch, holding the box while Evelyn's SUV drove away. No one spoke. I placed the photo in the center of the coffee table. Mason's face was turned slightly toward the camera. Even in the still image, anyone could see he had been crying. Evelyn whispered. "He is a sensitive child," Naomi said. "Please let Claire continue." I showed them the letter. Not the whole thing, just the lines that mattered. Documented enough. Right people. Custody review. This can stay private. Then the fake journal pages. Then the surveillance photos. Then the picture of the device taped inside the lighthouse. Marjorie put her hand over her mouth. One cousin muttered, "Jesus." Grant finally leaned forward. "You are presenting this without context," Naomi said. "You will have an opportunity to provide context in the proper legal setting." Grant looked at her like furniture had spoken. "This is family," Naomi replied. "Then perhaps you should not have labeled a USB drive for custody review." The room went silent again. Evelyn began to cry. "I was afraid," she said. "I was afraid she was taking him away, and we would never see him again." Beatrice's face did not soften. "So you frightened the child?" Evelyn shook her head. "No, I only wanted Claire to understand. For years, I had waited for my mother to say one real sentence. 'I am sorry, I hurt you. I was wrong.' Even then, some wounded part of me waited." She did not say it. Instead, she looked around the room and whispered, "You all know how Claire can be." Something inside me went quiet. Not numb. Clear. I closed the binder. I stood. "You do not get to turn my child's fear into a character flaw of mine." Grant stood too. "You are making a spectacle." "No," I said. "You made evidence. I brought copies." Aunt Beatrice inhaled sharply. Eli's eyes filled. Grant pointed at the binder. "You think paperwork makes you powerful?" "No, I think paperwork makes you honest when you refuse to be." That was the moment their power in the room broke. Not because they confessed. People like that rarely do. It broke because everyone finally saw the machine behind the performance. Beatrice stood slowly. "Evelyn, did you know about the photographs?" Evelyn wiped her face. "I knew Grant had concerns. That is not what I asked." Evelyn looked at Grant. Grant said, "We monitored a situation." Beatrice's voice turned cold. "You followed a child." Grant said nothing. And because he said nothing, the truth filled the room for him. The protective order was granted the next morning. Temporary at first, then extended after the court reviewed the police report, the letter, the fake journal pages, the surveillance photos, Eli's workplace statement, Grant's voicemail, Mason's account, and the device. Evelyn and Grant were prohibited from contacting Mason. They could not come to our home, they could not approach his school, they could not attend his activities, they could not send gifts, they could not use relatives to pass messages. For the first time in my life, a document said what my childhood had never been allowed to say. Their version of love was not above someone else's safety. The USB made everything uglier. There were audio clips from our home, short fragments, edited conversations. Me telling Mason, "You are not going," after he begged to skip school because he was exhausted. Eli saying, "I can't breathe in here," during a panic episode years earlier. Mason crying after a nightmare, clipped so it sounded like fear of us instead of fear after a thunderstorm. There were screenshots from public school event posts, notes about Mason's schedule, a folder titled Relocation Instability, a draft letter to a family court attorney, and one file labeled Claire Anger. It was 12 seconds long, my voice saying, "I am done letting her do this." That was it. Grant had saved 12 seconds of a daughter finally telling the truth and labeled it anger. That was what people like him did. They built cages out of fragments and called them evidence, but his plan failed because he got impatient. He wanted fear fast. He wanted us to cancel the move before anyone looked too closely. So he pushed too hard. He used my child as the messenger. He put the proof in Mason's hands. He gave us the box, and the box gave us everything. Consequences came in waves. Grant did not lose every client overnight, but his largest contract with a private elementary school was suspended after the protective order became known through proper channels. No school wanted a child safety consultant attached to surveillance photos of his own step-grandson. Evelyn stepped down from 2 charity committees involving children's events. She told people she was focusing on her health. Aunt Beatrice told people the truth when they asked. Not dramatically, not cruelly, just plainly. There is a protective order. A child was frightened. That is all I will say. For Evelyn, that was worse than gossip. Gossip gives people fog to hide in. Plain truth gives them walls. Some relatives still messaged me. "You only get one mother. Mason needs grandparents. Forgiveness is healthier than bitterness." I did not argue. I sent one sentence. Forgiveness is not access. Then I blocked them. We moved to Portland 9 days later than planned. The drive was not triumphant. I thought safety would feel like victory the moment we crossed the state line. It did not. Safety felt like exhaustion first. Mason slept for long stretches in the back seat, his stuffed turtle under his chin. Every time we stopped for gas, he looked around the parking lot. Every silver SUV made his shoulders rise. At a hotel in Virginia, someone knocked on the wrong room door, and Mason crawled under the blanket shaking. Eli sat on the floor beside the bed until he came out. He did not say there was nothing to be scared of. That sentence is not always kind. Sometimes children know exactly what fear is for. He only said, "We checked the lock, we are here, we believe you." In Portland, the air smelled colder. Our house was smaller than the one in Charleston, with old floors and windows that rattled when the wind came off the water. Mason chose the room facing the maple tree. For the first week, he slept with the lamp on. For the second week, he asked if Grandma could find us through the mail. For the third week, he asked if judges ever made kids live with people who scared them. We answered every question. Not perfectly. Honestly. Tessa helped us find a child therapist named Dr. Anika Rose. Mason barely spoke during the first session. He built towers out of wooden blocks and knocked them down with one finger. The second session, he told her about the box. The third, he asked if adults can love you and still do bad things. Dr. Rose said, "Yes, but love does not erase responsibility." Mason brought that sentence home like a smooth stone from the beach. He repeated it at dinner. Love doesn't erase responsibility. Eli looked at me across the table. We both had to look away. Healing came in small pieces. Mason stopped building models for a while. The broken lighthouse had taken something from him. Eli did not pressure him. He set up a small work table in Mason's room anyway. Glue, cardboard, paint, tiny brushes, a lamp with a bendy neck. "Only if you want," he said. For weeks, Mason used the table for socks and comic books. Then one rainy afternoon, I came upstairs with laundry and heard scissors. I stopped outside his door. He was sitting at the table in pajamas, cutting cardboard carefully. There were strips of white paper beside him, blue paint, a small plastic cup of water. No one was guiding him. No one was praising him. No one was turning it into a lesson. He was building. He looked up and saw me. For a second, he looked embarrassed. Then he said, "It's not a lighthouse." "What is it?" "A bridge." "That sounds good." He looked back down. "It has two sides, but you only cross if it's safe." I had to press my hand against the doorframe. On one side of the bridge, he had written "us." On the other side, he had written "safe people." Across the middle, in careful black marker, he had written 3 words. "Truth goes first." That was when I cried. Not because my son was broken, because he was healing in a language that belonged to him. Because he was learning something I did not learn until my 30s. Love without safety is not love a child can live inside. Months passed. The protective order became part of our life like a smoke detector on the ceiling, not something we stared at every day. Something there because danger had once taught us to prepare. Evelyn tried once to send Mason a Christmas ornament through a cousin. Naomi made one phone call. It never happened again. Grant sent Eli a letter at work marked personal. Eli did not open it. He gave it to Naomi. It was added to the file. Boring, precise, impossible to dismiss. I thought often about the old memory box. How many photos had I seen inside it as a child? How many ribbons? How many birthday cards? How many carefully saved objects that said we were loved, while the actual child in that house learned to apologize for having feelings? That box had always been a shrine to appearance. In the end, it became evidence. There was justice in that. Not loud justice. Not movie justice. No dramatic courtroom confession. No apology in the rain. Just the documented collapse of the story they had spent years building. Grant lost access to rooms where his polished voice used to matter. Evelyn lost the automatic sympathy she had always collected like rent. And I lost something too. The fantasy that one day my mother would become safe if I explained my pain clearly enough. That loss hurt. I will not pretend it did not. There were nights in Portland when I missed the idea of her so badly I could barely breathe. Not the real Evelyn, the mother I had kept trying to find underneath her. The one I imagined might someday knock gently, hold my face and say, "I should have protected you better." But grief is not proof you made the wrong choice. Sometimes grief is what your body feels when it finally stops waiting outside a locked door. A year after the box arrived, Mason's school held a family art night. Students displayed projects on folding tables in the cafeteria. Mason had built a coastal bridge scene with paper waves and small cardboard boats passing underneath. At the edge of the display, he had written a short paragraph. "Bridges connect safe places. A bridge is strong because it has supports. People need supports too." I read it twice. Then I stepped into the hallway and cried beside a vending machine while Eli stood guard like crying in school hallways was a normal adult activity. When I came back, Mason asked if I liked it. I told him the truth. "I love it." He smiled. His real smile, the one that used to disappear around Evelyn. That night, after he fell asleep, Eli and I sat on the back steps listening to wind move through the maple tree. He asked, "Do you ever wish we had left without the goodbye lunch?" I did not answer right away. For months, I had tortured myself with that question. If I had said no, Mason would not have carried the box. He would not have seen the photos. He would not have heard the threat. He would not have asked if court could take him away. That guilt still visits me. Maybe it always will. But I also know this. Evelyn and Grant had already been watching him. They had already taken the journal. They had already recorded, collected, edited, and planned. The lunch did not create their danger. It revealed it. I told Eli. I wish he had never been hurt, but I'm grateful we found out before they got better at hiding it. Eli took my hand. For a long time, neither of us spoke. That is the thing about protecting your child from family. People talk about it like one dramatic decision, one slammed door, one blocked number, one legal paper. But it is smaller and harder than that. It is checking the school pickup list twice. It is saving voicemails you wish you could delete. It is explaining that children are not responsible for adult loneliness. It is letting yourself be called cruel by people who preferred you silent. It is grieving the family story you wanted while protecting the child standing in the real one. My mother thought the memory box would scare me into obedience. She thought the photographs would prove she still had reach. She thought the fake journal would make me doubt my own home. She thought the hidden device would make us feel watched even after we left. She thought my son's fear would become her leverage. Instead, that box became the last object she ever used to enter my life. It became the record. It became the proof. It became the thing that showed the court, the school, our relatives, and finally me what I had been trying to explain since childhood. Control can wear pearls. Threats can be written in cursive. A family keepsake box can hold evidence instead of love. And sometimes the most dangerous sentence in the world is, "This is a family matter." No. A child's fear is not a family matter. A hidden device is not a family matter. Surveillance is not a family matter. Fake journal entries are not a family matter. Threatening court to control a mother is not a family matter. Those are choices, and choices can have consequences. Ours did. Mason is 11 now. He still startles sometimes when someone knocks too hard. He still likes knowing who is coming over before they arrive. But he builds constantly again. Bridges, boats, tiny houses. Once, even a lighthouse. When I saw it on his shelf, my chest tightened. He noticed. "It's okay," he said. Then he picked it up and showed me the base. This one was not hollow. No hidden place. No secret compartment. Just solid cardboard, glued thick. Across the bottom, where no one would see unless they turned it over, he had written one word. Mine. That is healing too. Not forgetting, not pretending, claiming. If you are listening to this while wondering whether you are wrong for setting a boundary with someone who shares your blood, remember this. Healthy love does not need surveillance. Healthy love does not need fear. Healthy love does not need a child to carry messages, secrets, threats, guilt, or proof. The people who truly belong in your life will not ask you to silence your child's pain so they can keep their title. Family is not who demands access. Family is who becomes safe enough to deserve it. My mother sent my son home with a locked memory box because she thought fear would bring me back under control. But she forgot something. Boxes can be opened, devices can be found, documents can be filed, children can be believed. And once the truth is protected, the people who depended on your silence do not get to call your freedom betrayal. They only get to watch you leave with the proof.